Processing and the manufacturing that is a more expensive part of the whole process. There's a conception there.
Armstrong. Finally, this weekend marks 70 years since the creation of the UK's first national park in the Peak District.
This is good for the soul. We're looking across your fields up towards Mamtor and the Great Ridge with a lovely dusting of snow.
Smith. The studio manager is Ilse Laderman and the producer in Bristol is Heather Simons.
Now, that's your weather. Thanks, Louise. And you can get our latest weather forecasts on our website. Now, let's take a look back to 1981.
BBC Sounds.
40 years ago in my hometown Brixton, it was burning. There was a full-on riot.
The rapper.
This is BBC Radio 4.
It's 7 o'clock on Saturday the 17th of April. Good morning, this is Today with Simon Jack in London and Justin Webb at Windsor Castle, where Prince Philip's funeral will hear tributes to his courage, to his service, to his loyalty to the Queen. In the programme, we'll also be hearing about the man who didn't like to stand on ceremony, even with other royals.
I first went to lunch at Windsor.
Friends.
He went right down the line of hundreds of young people, talking to them all.
Help shape England's route out of lockdown. The BBC News this morning is read by Caroline Nichols.
Questions answered from BBC News.
I didn't have a weakness. I was strong in all departments.
Side stories of the gods of snooker. Coming soon to BBC Two and iPlayer.
Good morning, welcome to breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, inside the grounds of Windsor Castle, where today the Queen will lead the royal family and the nation in mourning at the funeral of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. The service will pay tribute to Prince Philip's unwavering loyalty to the Queen. 73 years of marriage. Her Majesty shares one of her favourite photos of herself and her husband relaxing in the Scottish Highlands. This is St George's Chapel in Windsor. A small group of family members will walk through the castle grounds this afternoon in procession behind the Duke's coffin. We'll be looking ahead to the service throughout the programme this morning.
And also on breakfast, tributes to the actor Helen Mccrory, who's died at the age of 52. The author J.K. Rowling described the news as simply heartbreaking.
All the details coming up shortly.
Where the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place this afternoon, watched by millions of people around the world. The Queen will sit alone as she says goodbye to her husband of 73 years. Away. On breakfast this morning, we'll be hearing from those who knew the Duke and those who...
Throughout the course of this week, we can see that, as the head of the armed forces said yesterday, the Duke's imprints are all over it. So we saw the pictures there of the Land Rover hearse, of course, a vehicle that he was very much involved with the design, spent years apparently tweaking it, getting the colour right, getting everything just in the right place. The order of service, a service that he wanted to have, a deeply religious service, in line, we're told, by Buckingham Palace with royal funerals. There's no eulogy, there are no readings by members of the royal family, but what does come through with the hymns, with the music that's been chosen, was his love of the sea and definitely connection with the Royal Navy. She'll be alone, she will be wearing a face mask, there will be nobody to put an arm round her, and I think that is what will really make it feel very different. Indeed, and there will be 700 or so members of the armed forces here.
Distinctive to the end. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
So let's remind you, the service will begin. It says the Dean of Windsor, who will lead the service. Well, joining me now is our royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell. Sarah, so these are the details which were just released late last night, is that right?
Yes, the order of service was released late last night, and I think together with the details that we've had released throughout the course of this week, we can see that, as the head of the armed forces said yesterday, the Duke's imprints are all over it. So,
Louise, thanks very much. It does feel, doesn't it, you get a bit of spring and then the cold air comes back just to bring us back to reality. Louise, thanks very much. Let's take a look at some of today's papers. Of course, nearly all of them are looking ahead to the events in Windsor today. The Daily Telegraph leads with a newly released photograph of the Duke of Edinburgh alongside the Queen, together with a quote from the Dean of Windsor, who will lead today's service. It reads, "Sun" carries the headline, "Farewell, my Prince," alongside the same photograph, which was taken in 2003 by Sophie, Countess of Wessex, in the grounds of Balmoral Castle. "One last moment with her prince" is the Daily Mail headline. The paper quotes sources who say the Queen has become the epitome of dignity in the aftermath of the Duke's death. And The Guardian doesn't lead on the Duke's funeral. It has a story about pregnant women being given the go-ahead to have the COVID vaccine. The photograph you're seeing is of the actor Helen Mccrory, who died yesterday at the age of 52. Time now is 17 minutes past 6.
Without theatre, this isn't a city.
It brings people together, brings joy, laughter, happiness, sensation.
A place to escape.
To connect.
To feel.
If only for a short while. Truly alive.
Live theatre lights up BBC4 this spring.
Good morning, you're watching BBC Breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, here in this spectacular setting of Windsor Castle. As you can probably see behind me, the sun is rising over this place where the funeral procession for the Duke of Edinburgh will begin at 2:45 this afternoon. Commander of Strategic Command. A little earlier this week, I sat down with the General to ask his thoughts on this occasion and his memories of the Duke.
Stadia has showed me is that putting a full console-style ecosystem into the cloud really can work, as long as your internet connection is good enough.
And that's it for the shortcut of Click for this week. The full-length version is waiting for you right now on iPlayer.
As ever, you can keep up with the team on social media. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at BBC Click.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, inside the grounds of Windsor Castle, where today the Queen will lead the royal family and the nation in mourning at the funeral of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh.
Bands, which music, which medals will be there. So it is very much his funeral designed by him.
A cherished moment during in the Scottish Highlands. This is St George's Chapel in Windsor. A small group of family members will walk through the castle grounds this afternoon in procession behind the Duke's coffin. We'll be looking ahead to the service throughout the programme this morning.
And also on the programme, it's now under investigation.
In sports, as part of the government's latest pilot scheme.
Good morning. The day. All the details coming up shortly.
It's Saturday, the 17th of April. Good morning from Windsor Castle, where the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place this afternoon. Watched by millions of people around the world, it will be a small family affair because, in line with COVID restrictions, only 30 people will be allowed into St George's Chapel.
Within the chapel, the order of service will proceed precisely as the Duke had prescribed. He chose the music and the readings.
There's a lot in there that is very him.
So just a reminder for you, the service itself will begin at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and we can take a look at that now. Inside it has a message from the Dean of Windsor, who will lead the service, paying tribute to Prince Philip's kindness, humour and humanity. Well, joining me here in Windsor this morning, our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell. Morning to you, Sarah. So the order of service gives us a bit more detail on what will happen.
It does, as you say, released last night, and you said the Dean of Windsor there paying tribute to the Duke and also talking about his unwavering loyalty to the Queen, which of course will be remembered today. This, it's clear, is very eternal father, strong to save. That's traditionally associated with seafarers and maritime armed services. When the coffin is lowered into the royal vault, buglers will play the last post, and they will also play action stations. That's the call them to man the battleships on warships. Again, this nod back to the Duke of Edinburgh's naval service during the Second World War. It will feel different.
Because we're within the grounds here, but inside the walls itself, there is a procession that will go from the area behind us here to the chapel itself.
And then the procession will come down. Following the Land Rover hearse will be several members, 9 members of the royal family walking on foot, so led by Prince Charles and Princess Anne at the front, the Duke's children. Behind them, William and Harry, separated by toll. As this travels through the Windsor grounds, gets to the west steps of St George's Chapel just before 3 o'clock, and as you say, then there will be that minute's silence, which guns will be fired here. They will be fired in cities across the UK to mark the beginning and the end of that minute's silence. Then the service itself will start, and it's due to last around about 50 minutes.
So the Duke's funeral will be watched, of course, by millions of people all across the world, but particularly so possibly in the Commonwealth. We can speak now to our South Asia correspondent, Rajini Vaidyanathan, who's in India. Rajini, very good morning to you. Prince Philip made several very memorable royal visits there. Tell us a little bit about his legacy.
Well, as you say, Charlie, Prince Philip visited India, where I am right now, and the wider South Asia region on a number of occasions. In fact, he came in 1959 on a solo visit where he visited India and Pakistan. And in India here, he was greeted by Prime Minister Nehru. And then, as you say, he came on a number of occasions with Her Majesty the Queen as well. Now, older generations of South Asians will certainly remember those visits, but perhaps younger people in the region may not recall them. But what I found so striking, Charlie, in the last week is actually uncovering a deeper legacy that the Duke of Edinburgh leaves, and that is through his award scheme known as the International Award here. Now, more than 150,000 students have taken part in the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award in South Asia, and I was speaking to some of them this week. I talked to a young woman in Sri Lanka who said that the scheme transformed her life. She said often in countries in this region there's an emphasis on formal education, but what the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme gave her was the chance to branch out in extracurricular activities, and by doing those expeditions which you have to do on the scheme, she got to go and visit different parts of her country, and also by doing the community service and volunteering work, she said it gave a huge amount of confidence. And so I thought it was quite striking that you have a woman in her 20s paying tribute to Prince Philip through that scheme. I also talked to the teacher of a blind boys academy in Kolkata, which has put hundreds of students through the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and he also said that the opportunity for students at the academy to interact with the wider community really transformed lives. So I think that is the lasting legacy in South Asia. And Prince Philip described his scheme as a do-it-yourself growing up kit, and I think even after his death people will continue to grow through his scheme.
Rajini, thank you very much for that. Let's go to another part of the Commonwealth now, and we can speak to our Australia correspondent, Shaima Khalil, who's in Sydney. Shaima, a very good morning to you. This is a country, of course, the Duke knew well.
Absolutely. The Duke of Edinburgh came here more than 20 times over 70 years, and in that time he had really forged a close relationship with the country and its people. There's a great deal of admiration and respect for him here, and a great deal of sadness, of course, at the news of his death. The flag over the Sydney Harbour Bridge is flying at half-mast again today. When the news broke of the death, tributes came from all over, from dignitaries, from politicians, and the public as well. It was also marked in Sunday services across Australia, and we were at St Andrew's Cathedral here in Sydney, a cathedral that the Duke and the Queen had visited many times on their royal visits, and you could just see how personal it felt for so many people. We spoke of a woman who appeared quite sad, and she said she wanted to come and pray for the Duke, pray for the Queen and the royal family, and spoke of her memories of those royal visits. Australians like to describe the Duke as a larrikin, someone who speaks their mind, who says it as it is. He will be remembered for his robust sense of humour and, of course, yes, the gaffes, but also for character, for being able to connect with people. And I think most fondly, he will be remembered as a long-time friend to Australia.
Shyman, thank you very much. Well, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, will play a key part in today's service. He's been speaking to the BBC ahead of the
grief of this very, very hard year that we've all gone through. And then we'll say the best thing we can do is to do what he did in all his life. Just get on with it.
Thoughts there of the Archbishop of Canterbury. So let's just remind you of the timings today. You can follow live coverage of the funeral. That'll be in a special programme from midday here on BBC One, with further coverage from 8:10 this evening. We're saying also being broadcast on BBC Radio 4 and Radio 5. Live coverage starts from 2 p.m. You may have heard in the background there's quite a few comings and goings here this morning. As you know, public have been asked to stay away, and it is very quiet in Windsor. Walking up here this morning, they're not expecting people to arrive, and that's very much the message. And I think, as you can see inside, we're just in the grounds outside Windsor Castle itself, but as you can see, the calm and tranquility inside Windsor Castle itself. We have beautiful blue skies here. The temperature is rising. It is a stunning day and a magnificent setting for events later in the afternoon. For the moment, that's all from here at Windsor Castle.
Charlie, thank you.
The creak of the auditorium door.
Still being warned to exercise caution when we're out and about. Let's take stock of the latest COVID developments with one of our regular breakfast GPs, Dr. Sarah Jarvis. Good morning to you, Dr. Jarvis. Morning. So, look, we're hearing about a new variant, aren't we? Which is unsurprising because, of course, there are many variants, but a new variant that's being investigated here in the UK. What can you tell us about it?
So we've already had several cases of the South African variant, which we've known about for some time now. And of course, we've had cases there in Lambeth, in Wandsworth, that spread. They found a case in Southwark. There's a case in Barnet. So they're doing pop-up testing and in some cases house-to-house testing there. But we've also got this Indian variant. And the Indian variant is a real concern because they've seen a very sharp spike of cases in India. And they think that this variant, which perhaps not surprisingly, because we've heard it many times now, we've all become rather expert at it, has got mutations in the spike protein, which may help it first to get into cells more easily, which might make it more infectious, and secondly, may help it to avoid immunity from the vaccination. We've now got about 73 cases in England confirmed and about 4 cases in Scotland, and surge testing is going on in all the places where that's been identified. You are between 8 and 10 times more likely to get this very severe clot than if you have the vaccine.
Dr. Sarah Jarvis, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking us through all of that. It's just coming up to 7:30. You're watching BBC Breakfast. Charlie is at Windsor Castle, of course, ahead of the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh later today. We'll have more of that coming up.
Good morning. You're watching BBC Breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, here at Windsor Castle, where the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place this afternoon. We know, of course, that just 30 guests will attend, that in line with COVID restrictions. And the public has been asked to stay away. The people of Windsor, though, are preparing to mark the occasion in their own way. Graham Satchell has been finding out.
After the Royal Marines play the last post, the state trumpeters will play this, the Reveille. It signifies the start of a new day, as one chapter of history comes to a close. Graham Satchell, BBC News, Windsor.
It's probably worth saying for people who don't know Windsor well, as you can see the castle here behind me, lit up in beautiful sunlight now, that the castle itself is so close to the town. And as you heard from those people that we were talking to a moment ago, they really do feel like they're very connected to the royal family here. And you can see the outside of the castle there. There will be a contrast today because people have been asked to stay away. In other circumstances around the outside of the walls, you'd expect many people to be gathering. But I can tell you now, just looking down the outside of the walls here, there are very, very few people gathering, just as the police and the royal household had asked. And you're seeing the images from inside the castle walls itself. That's where the ceremony will take place and the procession will take place. That's at 3 o'clock later today. Looking up the skies here, actually, I'm seeing that there are very few planes flying anywhere at the moment. You'll know that because of COVID. But I know that for the silence that's happening later on today, Heathrow has said they won't be flying planes at that time. So there will be a real sense of occasion then. I think also we can show you an image over Buckingham Palace today. Of course, events very much focusing on Windsor. Former BBC Royal correspondent Jenny Bond joining us from Devon. Morning to you, Jenny. I wanted to bring us back in a way. Many people talking about the Duke of Edinburgh. This is a special day, many memories of him. But for a lot of people, their first thoughts today will be for Her Majesty the Queen.
And as the Right Reverend David Connor will say, the very kind man that he was.
Jenny, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your memories with us this morning. Good to speak to you. And here at Windsor Castle, you'll see from the image behind me, we have bright sunshine this morning. It's really changed. The temperatures warming up. It is going to be a stunning day in this magnificent setting. Naga, I hand back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Beautiful scenes there at Windsor, of course, but no crowds. People being urged to stay away from the event this afternoon, of course, the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh.
If it was going badly, I can tell you we'd be highlighting that too.
Now, in your career, you've covered, MERS and SARS, and we're a year now into COVID-19, and I was thinking, we've got all these new variants that are still emerging. How would you assess where things are in the pandemic and where the story might go?
Well, crystal ball gazing with this, we should give a big health warning on that, whatever I'm about to say now. But I'm optimistic that with immunisation, that we in the UK are going to be in a far better place within the next couple of months towards. There's still a huge job to do.
Fergus Walsh, thank you so much. But many viewers have been confused by some of the acronyms used by characters in the latest series. The fast-paced, action-packed show follows the work of AC-12, the unit.
BBC Radio Derby. We've got breaking news. We need an SPJ to refer up to an asset.
There's only one thing we're interested in, telling news stories. You, do a VO and put it in a package now.
Mother of God, get a move on. We need a breaking news jingle, a ramp and bed.
Yes,
and can you make sure that Q and Bacano to the left of the law?
Roger that. Someone get Ed Paul.
Heidi, when you're out, we're going to need a Vox from you that we can replay from the rot later, OK?
Yes, Gov.
Somebody get the verve ready.
Now we're sucking diesel.
Radio Derby told us they were inspired to make that spoof, in part to dispel the myth that local radio stations take themselves too seriously. Beyond that, they weren't prepared to answer any questions without a lawyer present. If you'd like us to expose what you see as wrongdoing on the part of BBC News, that's all from us. We'll be back to hear your thoughts about BBC News coverage again next week. Goodbye.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, inside the grounds of Windsor Castle, where today the Queen will lead the royal family and the nation in mourning at the funeral of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. The service will pay tribute to... This is St George's Chapel in Windsor. A small group of family members will walk through the castle grounds this afternoon in procession behind the Duke's coffin. We'll be looking ahead at the service throughout the programme this morning.
Also on Breakfast.
Throughout the day. All the details coming up shortly.
It's Saturday, the 17th of April. Good morning from Windsor Castle, where the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place this afternoon. Watched by millions of people around the world. It will be a small family affair because, in line with COVID restrictions, only 30 people will be allowed into St George's Chapel. We're hearing from those who knew the Duke and those who've been involved in the meticulous planning for today's events. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
A reminder of the Duke's years of service in the Royal Navy. A reminder, too, that he was a royal consort with a difference. Distinctive to the end. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
And just a reminder for you of the timetable today. The service itself will begin at 3 o'clock this afternoon, following a nationwide minute's silence. The order of service has been released by Buckingham Palace. Sarah Campbell, morning to you, Sarah. In beautiful, bright sunshine, it's worth saying today is a spectacular morning. Talk to us a little bit more about what we know about the service itself.
As you say, the order of service released late last night, and I think in common with all of the details which have been sort of gradually made public over the course of the week, we can sense the Duke's hand in the order of service. And again, very much a nod to his naval past. Of course, he saw active service in the Second World War. Lots of personal touches throughout, not just in the service, but on the procession, which we've seen the pictures of the Land Rover son in the middle walking through, and behind them the Queen will follow in the Stayt Bentley. So it will be a real moment, and I think the palace, although they've been saying it, yes, it will have been scaled down. It was still long years of service. They will line that procession route.
Sarah, it's probably worth saying, isn't it? And members of the military we've spoken to and the royal household themselves are saying that there will be a change in tone during the build-up to the event itself, where you have the military element inside the walls of the castle, and then a moment when they enter the chapel, at which point it becomes a very intimate, albeit with the cameras showing the pictures around the world.
Family and military.
Sarah, for the moment, thank you very much. So the Duke's service with the armed forces will be reflected in the funeral, not least in that unique hearse. You'll have seen that, made from a Colonel Erica Bridge, former commander of the King's Troop, who now leads on planning and training the Army's senior officers just outside the castle grounds, a little way down the walls of the castle from where we're standing here. Erica, very good morning to you. You know all about planning for royal events, and the military presence for this scaled down event has a different tone to it this time round.
Good morning, Charlie. Yes, it does. And I think what is really important about today's events is it is very much in line with the wishes of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. And I think that's really important for all of those people taking part to him on behalf of all three services today.
Erica, one of the things everyone is very mindful of is the crossover with other people's lives and during the pandemic.
And as you say, there will be a scaled down a number of troops who will be out there today, but the really important thing is that all of those organisations which had a very close affiliation with the Duke of Edinburgh will be represented today in some form or other.
Every detail has followed, that they could feel the emotion of the occasion.
I imagine for everybody out there today, there will be a number of moments of real reflection. That the main focus absolutely is His Royal Highness and perhaps the links that they would have had with him. You know, many of those soldiers, sailors and airmen on parade today may well have met him as he came to visit their units. And so that will be absolutely front and foremost in their minds today.
Erica, fairly early on in the planning procedure,
This is the royal family. It is absolutely up to their wishes, and so we all respect absolutely how they would like today to run.
That's Lieutenant Colonel Erica Bridge. Erica, thank you very much for your time this morning and joining us here at Windsor Castle. Let's remind you can, of course, follow the live coverage of the funeral. There will be a special programme. And you'll have already seen by now, by the blue skies and the sunshine above me, it is a beautiful day here at Windsor Castle in this spectacular setting. We are just in the grounds outside the walls. You can see the image there. Within the walls, that's where the procession itself will take place. And you can see Windsor Castle itself looking magnificent in the bright sunshine ahead of the events. The service itself at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Nagel, hand you back to the studio now.
Charlie, thanks very much. Isn't it timely to talk to Louise now to find out what's happening with the morning weather? Of course, today, the funeral of His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Died at the age of 99 and he's being buried today. There will be a 1-minute silence held across the country at 3 p.m. when that funeral takes place. And as Louise was saying, sunshine for many of us across the country today, but a frosty start for many as well this morning. But the sun's certainly coming through now, and that's the view over central London. 19 minutes past 8. And of course, as that sunshine came out last night, saw the long-awaited return in England of a time-honoured pastime, a Friday evening in the pub, or I should say at least outside. The Keen Walker, tell me about some of the views you're going to be taking in and the people you're going to be walking with.
Yeah, so I'm a really keen walker, particularly a hill walker. So I've been bagging the Munros, which are the 282 mountains over 3,000 feet in Scotland. So tonight I'm going to be walking, not on a Munro, but with a friend that I've not seen for months on a local hill called Tintoff in England or abroad. So I'm on my own up here. So walking with my group and staying in touch with my group, even when we weren't allowed to walk as a group, has been so important to me.
Good morning. You're watching BBC Breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, here at Windsor Castle, where the funeral procession for the Duke of Edinburgh will begin at 2:45 this afternoon. I can tell you in bright sunshine here at Windsor Castle, you can see the Royal Standard flying there, not a breath of wind against those blue skies. It is a magnificent setting. Let's find out a little more about the event itself and how it will unfold. One of those walking in front of the coffin will be General Sir Patrick Sanders, Commander of Strategic Command.
He was very interested in the spiritual and religious aspects, and this came through in his chairmanship of St George's House very clearly.
Robert, I mean, for a lot of people, they will have seen some of that relationship, your father's relationship and what happened there, via television, via The Crown, which...
So, what it didn't get through clearly enough until the very end, and those who watched The Crown will have noticed there was a footnote at the end of the programme which said how important St George's House was to the Duke and all his thinking about spiritual and religious and ethical matters. He handled meetings, and indeed the way he put people right who weren't quite correct in what they said.
And many people, Robert, and you know this place well, have reflected on, because of the necessity of COVID restrictions, the numbers so limited, just 30 people.
Rather than having the choir can hold many, many more people than 30 people. And I think cutting it down to 30 will give it that personal flavour which you mentioned. I think that's probably a good thing.
Robert, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm sure you, like millions of people here in the UK and around the world, will be watching events as they unfold on television. So thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
And thank you for your time, and I hope all goes well with the funeral. Thank you.
Well, yes, absolutely. We have a spectacular setting today. You'll have seen behind me this morning the blue skies and the bright sunshine over Windsor Castle. You can see we're just in the grounds, actually, of the castle itself. But of course, the events themselves, the procession, the very personal elements will take place within the walls of the castle itself. The weather could not be more fitting to what will be a remarkable occasion. So we'll leave you with those images, and I will hand you back to the studio and to Naga.
Charlie, thanks very much. Time now is 7 minutes to 9. Now, from James Bond to Harry Potter, Peaky Blinders and Doctor Who, the actor Helen Mccrory lit up some of the biggest films and television series of the last 20 years, as well as having a highly acclaimed stage career. Yesterday, she died at the age of just 52. Let's take a look at some of her work. Helen Mccrory, who died yesterday at the age of 52. Well, we can hear more about her amazing talent from our entertainment correspondent, Colin Patterson.
That she was ill. She'd been on TV doing interviews, publicising the Edinburgh Trust within the last month and a half. So a real shock at 4:30 yesterday when Damian Lewis, her husband, the Homeland star, put this tweet out just saying that he was heartbroken to announce that after a heroic battle with cancer, the beautiful and mighty woman that is Helen Mccrory had died peacefully at home, surrounded by a wave of love from her friends and family, adding that she died as she lived, fearlessly. Now, Damian Lewis, she'd go up to the DJ, get him to put on Grace Jones, pull up to the bumper, and he would always find her because that was their song. And apparently they did a lot of dancing at home together. A
large breadth of career and different roles, and undoubtedly made many, many friends in...
Or Series 6, the final one of Peaky Blinders. J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter link, has also paid tribute, describing it as heartbreaking news. Because during lockdown, he worked with Helen Mccrory and Damian Lewis to raise almost £1 million for Feed NHS. It was a charity which persuaded restaurants to donate food to feed frontline care workers. About life, Helen Mccrory said, "I'm a very positive person. My grandmother taught me that happiness is both a skill and a decision, and you are responsible for the outcome."
Very wise words indeed. Colin, thanks very much. Colin Patterson there, remembering Helen Mccrory, who's died at the age of 52 yesterday. More from Charlie at Windsor Castle ahead of the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral coming up.
I didn't have a weakness.
Soon to BBC Two and iPlayer.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, inside the grounds of Windsor Castle, where today the Queen will lead the royal family and the nation in mourning at the funeral of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, in Windsor. A small group of family members will walk through the castle grounds this afternoon.
Chilly start once again, but there should be some decent spells of sunshine for most of us throughout the day. All the details coming up shortly.
Where the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place this afternoon, because in line with COVID restrictions, only 30 people will be allowed into St George's Chapel. The Queen will sit alone in association with the Royal Navy and his love of the sea. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
A man who gave much of his adult life in service to the country.
Sarah, thank you very much. Well, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, will play a key part in today's service. He's been speaking to the BBC ahead of the ceremony, started by reflecting on the Duke's personality. Of Canterbury, reflecting some of the crossover there is with those who've lost loved ones in the past year, the restrictions that will be in place for this event as well. For a royal of the Duke of Edinburgh's standing, normally you might expect here in Windsor there would be many, many thousands of people. Castle walls from where I'm standing, and you can see the foreground there. That would normally be a place where many people would gather. Yesterday there were some people here, mostly people who are from Windsor itself, and of course people here in Windsor very much saw the royal family as part of the community here. We'll have a unique position in today's events. Eleanor, very good morning to you. You're outside the gate just down from me here, but a little later on you will, and you'll tell me exactly if this is the case, you'll be the only reporter inside the chapel as the funeral takes place.
Yes, good morning, Charlie. We have the most extraordinary commentary position for BBC Radio. We have a number of commentators inside the walls of the castle today, including Claire Balding and Alan Little, but I'll be positioned actually inside the chapel itself and directly over the high altar in the Catherine of Aragon wooden balcony. People who've visited at St George's Chapel may well know it. It's high above the choir. It will be lowered very, very slowly down into the royal vault where kings and queens and princes and princesses have lain for many hundreds of years. It will be quite a spine-tingling moment of theatre, I think, in the service itself.
Eleanor, we've been speaking to members of the military and the royal household who've been explaining in a way the change in tone of the event today. Inside the walls, there will be the procession.
Yes, this contrast struck me the other day, actually. I watched the military procession as it came down the hill, led by the band of the Grenadier Guards, and just the magnificence of the 700-plus service personnel who'll be lining the route from the State Apartments down to the chapel itself. Adapted for the service as well. You heard that there will be Eternal Father Strong to Save, the Navy hymn, and other music and readings as well, which reflect the Duke's great interest in the natural world, in the environment, and in his naval fascination, his profession as a sailor as well. Of course, he was an admiral in the Royal Navy, but there are so many mentions of the music and readings as well, which reflect the Duke's great interest in the natural world, in the environment, and in his naval fascination, his profession as a the Duke's great interest in the natural world, in the environment, and in his naval fascination, his as well. You heard that there will be Eternal Father Strong to Save, the Navy hymn, and other music and readings as well, which reflect the Duke's great interest in the natural world, in the environment, and in his naval fascination, his sea. People who watch and listen to the service will notice that it features in the hymns, in the music, in the readings. But of course, hymns, something that is often a very great outlet for people at funerals, the chance to sing the hymns, that won't be allowed to happen either, because these are the COVID restrictions that people who've had church funerals this year have had to deal with.
Eleanor, thank you very much. So a reminder for you this morning, you can follow live coverage of the funeral at a special programme, 2 p.m. Well, you'll have seen by now, we are blessed this morning with very, very beautiful weather. We have bright blue skies and warm sunshine this morning. The image you can see there is inside the castle walls. As Eleanor was describing just a moment ago, that is where you will see the procession in advance of the service itself at 3 p.m. And we can have a look at the flag as well. The Royal Standard, not a breath of wind here. And you can see it is a magnificent setting. And as has been said all the way along, the royal household very keen to share this moment via the television and the radio coverage, and people are being asked to stay away. I can confirm from our position just in the grounds here of the castle, very few people here at the moment. In other circumstances, there may well have been a very different atmosphere. It is a beautiful day. The funeral itself at 3 p.m. this afternoon. I'll hand you back to the studio now and to Naga.
Charlie, thank you very much. And of course, is at Windsor Castle, and we'll have more from him coming up.
I didn't have a weakness. I was strong.
Good morning, you're watching BBC Breakfast with me, Charlie Stayt, here at Windsor Castle, where the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh will take place this afternoon. You can see the images from inside the castle walls there. It is a beautiful day and a remarkable setting for events. The service itself at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And if we look up just behind me, actually, there's not been a breath of wind during this morning, but just as you came to me a moment ago, little wind came up, the Royal Standard there, high above Windsor Castle against those blue skies. What we know, of course, is that just 30 guests will attend in line with COVID restrictions. And the public has been asked to stay away. I can tell you that here in Windsor, I was here a little bit yesterday afternoon into the evening, and the only people really you saw are local people. Many people here very much feel like the royal family are part of the community here. So Graham Satchell has been talking to some of those locally to see how they're feeling.
Reflect the Duke's military past. After the Royal Marines play the last post, the state trumpeters will play this, the Reveille. It signifies the start of a new day, as one chapter of history comes to a close. Graham Satchell, BBC News, Windsor.
Well, let's speak now to the Daily Telegraph's Camilla Tominey, who's covered royal news and tours for more than 15 years. She's just outside the castle walls in Windsor, just down the castle walls from where I'm standing in the castle grounds. Camilla, very good morning to you. The Duke of Edinburgh's signature is very clearly and obviously all over the events that people will see today.
That's right, Charlie. Of course, it's very scaled down because of coronavirus, but we can expect a huge military presence in keeping with him having served with distinction in the Second World War, always keeping up those Royal Navy and other military ties, and equally some nautical themes to this service. There's going to be a very poignant moment when the coffin is about to go into St George's Chapel, where a piping party is going to play a series of boatswains' calls. Now, they'll be familiar to any able seamen and women out there because they're the noises that would be made on a Royal Naval vessel at sea. And so I think we're very much going to see the funeral that has been meticulously planned in advance by the Duke. Of course, as well, all attention I think will be on that customised Land Rover hearse. He famously said to his wife that he wanted to be carried off in a Land Rover, and he's got that wish, Charlie.
Yes, and there are those elements to events today that will make people smile. I know members of the royal household and the military involved in that. So many people will be thinking about the Queen today because right at the heart of this is a family grieving for a loved one.
Absolutely. I mean, we obviously use the last week to reflect on the Duke's past, but I think equally keen in the mind has been the Queen's future without him. And as she approaches her own 95th birthday, I think that sympathies lie squarely with HM right now. There's this sense of her having been alongside her husband of 73 years. He's been such a key feature of her reign, taking those several steps behind her as she has carried out her public duties. And to be without him, I think, is going to be hugely difficult. It's also quite destabilising, isn't it, when we're so used to seeing them as a partnership, and then to have him missing, I think, does affect people. That 3 p.m. Minute silence won't just be a reflection on the Duke's life, of course, but as you say, Charlie, I think it will be a reflection on a very difficult 12 months for the country, with many, many people losing loved ones and wanting to take time out today to remember them.
Camilla, you'll know very well, and it's the Henry VIII Gate that you're standing at from royal events you've attended here. Normally, there would be hundreds, not thousands of people in.
Princess Eugenie and her husband Jack Brooksbank in 2018, really happy scenes. And yes, it does feel a bit strange. It feels a bit eerie not to have people lining the streets here, waving flags. It was obviously never going to be a celebratory move, but it is very, very toned down. Having said that, I think we're still going to get the pomp and pageantry that we would expect with a major royal event. That's going to be helped by the colourful nature of the military presence. But I think it is, because of COVID, going to be extraordinary to see the Queen following this procession in a Stayt Bentley with a face mask on, and then members of the family again having their faces covered inside and having to sit so distanced. The idea of the Queen being alone in the pews and not being able to be next to her nearest and dearest, I think, is going to make her seem like quite an isolated figure later.
Camilla, just on a final note, it's something I know you'll have asked people along the way. Have you got a particular thought, a memory from time?
Well, I think I'll take the words from the blessing that we're going to hear later, talking about his kindness, humour and humanity. And I've been on many jobs where he effectively would be playing the Queen's warm-up man and making people feel at ease. I remember being in Malta with them several years ago, where he commented to somebody who was waiting to meet his wife, "Shouldn't you have shaved before you meet the Queen?" Famously, the Queen doesn't like beards, and this man suddenly didn't know what to say, and the Duke burst out laughing. I mean, that was his role, very much to put people at ease, to make sure people's nerves were calmed, and also just to have common and human interaction with the people meeting the royals.
Camilla, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So that's all from our coverage this morning on Breakfast. You can, of course, follow the live coverage of the funeral, the special programme, 2 p.m. So, Naga, from a very sunny, blue skies all over Windsor Castle, I can tell you that at the moment, of course, very few planes flying because of COVID. During the minute's silence, we know that Heathrow will have no planes flying, so it'll be even more tranquil than it is now. Many people within the grounds itself covering the funeral, but also the staff, those involved. But the streets in and around Windsor, and it's so close to the town itself, very quiet this morning. And that image I think we'll leave you with this morning is inside the castle walls. This is just outside the gates, and it will be a very serene scene. That will be where the procession is led inside the castle walls just before 3 p.m. this afternoon. From here at Windsor Castle, goodbye.
Charlie, thanks very much, and very apt to see those rather tranquil scenes ahead of the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh this afternoon from 6 o'clock. Now, here on BBC One, you can follow live coverage to leave you with a look at the remarkable life of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, and just some of the reaction to his death over the past week at the age of 99. From all of us on the Breakfast team, goodbye.